Hello and welcome to the Untold Past. We recently visited Newark Air Museum in order to find out about specific aircraft that they had there. We had a fantastic time and we cannot wait to visit again in a few weeks. Join us as we explore lots of interesting aircraft and artifacts. Upon entering, there were a number of different aircraft outside the main hangars, including Gloster Meteor, the first jet aircraft to serve with the RAF and reach combat in World War II. There is also an English electric Canberra on display here. Throughout the 1950s, this was used as a medium bomber and also as a reconnaissance aircraft, and it could fly at a higher altitude than any other aircraft in the world. It also became the first jet aircraft to make a non-stop transatlantic flight. It isn't just military aircraft on display here, as they do have some passenger aircraft too, like this de Havilland Dove. What dominates the entrance area though in the outside exhibition is the huge and colossal Avro Vulcan that is on display here. Walking around it, you really do get a sense of the enormity of this aircraft. If you were on the wrong side of one of these things, you would really be in trouble. You can also see where the wheels retract up to, and also the size of the bombs that the Vulcan would carry. It is in amazing condition, and is also continuing to be restored by the museum. You can also see that this particular aircraft is painted with the insignia of the Rhodesian Regiment of the Royal Air Force. As a child, I was able to see one of these Vulcans fly, and it's an amazing sight seeing this intimidating huge aircraft fly along the skyline. Next to the Vulcan is an exhibition which contains many different jet engines. Here you can see the engines of many different aircraft. My particular highlight was seeing the Daimler Benz DB601 engine. This particular engine was recovered from a Messerschmitt Bf-110, which crash landed in Kent in 1941. Around the site also is a huge number of training aircraft. Some of these come from all over the world. One of the biggest aircraft on display is the Avro Shackleton. Designed by the same company that made the Lancaster Bomber, it was designed as a maritime patrol aircraft and was first introduced in 1951. It was developed in response to the Soviet Union expanding their Air Force program. On board, it was kitted out with equipment which would be used in anti-submarine warfare and able to find and locate enemy submarines. The aircraft was named after the famous polar explorer Ernest Shackleton. During the 1970s, the Avro Shackleton was replaced by the jet-powered Hawker Siddeley Nimrod. The Shackleton had a top speed of 302 miles per hour and would have a range of over 3,500 miles. On board it would carry torpedoes and depth charges, and in the nose of the aircraft was fitted with two 20mm cannons. Next to the Shackleton is the Handley Hastings. This aircraft was a British troop carrier and was also designed to transport freight. This aircraft had been rushed into service due to the need for additional transport to take part in the Berlin airlift. During this airlift, the Hastings was used mostly to transport coal to the area. It is estimated that the aircraft carried 55,000 tons of supplies during the Berlin airlift, with 2 aircraft being lost. Opposite the Hastings is a Dassault Mystere, the French fighter bomber built in the 1950s. Next to this is a North American Super Sabre. This aircraft was the first United States Air Force fighter capable of supersonic speed in level flight. The next piece on display is rather interesting. It's a fuselage remains of a Chinook that crash landed. Allegedly, no one on board suffered serious injuries when the accident happened, and it occurred just after takeoff after an issue with the rotator blades. There is also a Puma helicopter on display in this section. Outside of Hangar 1 there is a Blackburn Buccaneer, which is in pristine condition. This type of aircraft was a carrier-borne attack aircraft, meaning it would have to take off quickly at a short distance on an aircraft carrier. Initially the first production aircraft suffered from a number of accidents due to insufficient engine power. Interestingly, this aircraft could also have the capacity to attack using a nuclear bomb should it need to. Outside this hangar there are also a few bombs of which would have been dropped by a B-2 stealth bomber. Inside Hangar 1 you are greeted by a huge number of aircraft and exhibits. You are first greeted by a Mignet flying Flea, and there is also a number of different microlights. The Avro Anson that is on display here is rather interesting. It's a C-19 model. Initially, Ansons were developed during the 1930s and would have been primarily used as a training aircraft. It was found during the Second World War to be obsolete in combat. Following the war they were used as light transport and as an executive aircraft. Near to the Anson you will have the museum's Saab Drakken aircraft. These aircraft were Swedish and were the first fully supersonic aircraft to be deployed in Western Europe. It was a highly effective aircraft during the Cold War and although it wasn't designed as a dogfighting aircraft, could turn extremely quickly and was very manoeuvrable. The museum also has a de Havilland Vampire. This aircraft was the second jet fighter to be operated by the RAF after the Gloster Meteor, which you saw at the start of this video. It was the first jet fighter to be powered by a single jet engine. Work on the Vampire began in 1941 during the Second World War, and it was considered an experimental aircraft. However, after the war, it started to be mass produced. The Vampire would go on to be the first jet aircraft to traverse the Atlantic Ocean. Also in this hangar you have a Seahawk and many other aircraft. Towards the end of this hangar, you have a few extremely interesting exhibits. You can see part of a rotator blade for the Lancaster Bomber, and also part of the fuselage, as well as many other exhibits connected to this aircraft. As a nice touch, the museum have also put in an Anderson shelter into the museum, which has been dug down and covered over. There is also a victory garden which is maintained by the staff of the museum, and symbolises the Dig for Victory campaign which was prominent throughout World War II. Before we enter Hangar 2, enjoy the aircraft that is on display outside this hangar. The de Havilland Sea Vixen was awarded the crown of being the first British two-seater combat aircraft to achieve supersonic speed. A beautiful aircraft, it was phased out in 1972, and as of today there are currently no flying Sea Vixens. Also outside is a Fairey Gannet. Used by the Royal Navy, it was designed post-Second World War as a carrier-borne aircraft, and it was intended to be used as an airborne early warning aircraft. Upon entering Hangar 2, you are greeted by a Sea Harrier. This was the second member of the Harrier jump jet family that was developed. It first entered service with the RAF in April 1980. The Sea Harrier served in the Falklands War and also in the Balkans conflicts. The Sea Harrier was retired by the Royal Navy in 2006 after 98 were built. Also in this hangar is a Saab Viggen. This Swedish fighter was introduced in 1971 and at the time was the most advanced fighter jet in Europe until the introduction of the Tornado in 1981. It was retired from service in 2005 by the Swedish Air Force. The Hawker Hunter first flew in 1951 and was introduced in 1954. This aircraft had a huge military service, finally retiring in 2014. It was introduced as a manoeuvrable interceptor aircraft, being much more capable than the Meteor and de Havilland Venom. It also saw action in lots of different conflicts, such as the Suez Crisis, the Six-Day War and the Second Congo War, and also many other conflicts. Enjoy some footage of the last remaining aircraft in this hangar. Overall, we had an excellent day out at the Newark Air Museum and would definitely recommend you visit. Thank you very much for watching The Untold Past. To support the channel, please subscribe. Once again, thank you.